What's up guys, Matty here. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you 5 of my favorite Softube plugins that I use on my mixes every day. Softube's been around for a long time. They make really great plugins, really great emulations, and I love the saturation emulations that they do in particular. Before we do get started, please make sure to like and subscribe if you find this video helpful. Let's go. All right guys, so first on the list is Tape. It is a tape emulation plugin, but what's really cool about it is it not only sounds great, it's really easy to navigate and get different tones out of it really quickly. I'm always a big fan of plugins I can get a sound I'm looking for fast. So let me show you like what it can do, and then we'll go through some listening examples. So first you have some meters. They're basically just input meters or level meters. But what's really cool is they have this switch for THD, and that's a really cool switch to have, because sometimes if you're using this just in a subtle way for like a mastering application, you can see how much distortion it's creating. So it's really helpful in that respect. The amount is just what you would think, the amount. And then you have 3 different types. So the type A is like a Swiss tape machine from the 60s. Type B is like a transformer-based circuit. And C is like a British type machine. And they kind of go like less bass, a little more bass, or this is kind of middle of the road. And then C, if you want like a stronger bass, that's really good for that. Then you have tape speed, which is pretty self-explanatory. You know, if you weren't around the tape days like old men like myself, they had different speeds that you could record at. And 30 IPS, which is all the way to the top, was the best sounding one, whereas I never recorded a 1.5 IPS, but I guess it was possible. It was not so great sounding. So like sometimes if you're doing reggae or bass stuff, the 15 IPS sounded good. So they have different tape speeds for that reason, and they all give you different tones. If you click to the side, you can open up this little window here. You have a wet and dry knob, which is self-explanatory. Speed stability, that's how like wobbly it's gonna sound. And I'll show you guys in a minute, you can get a really cool chorus effect with that. High frequency trim is basically like a mastering EQ. This is really great actually if you're using it for something on a bus or a mastering situation, which I don't use it that much for, but it's a nice boost if you need to bring some of the air back, because what happens with tape sometimes is it will compress or cut off the higher frequencies, so that can help boost it back up. Then you have crosstalk, which is the way the left and right channels are talking to each other. Back in the day, tape, because it was like tracks right next to each other, the sound would blur a little bit. So that's what that is kind of emulating. What's cool, if you open this in Studio One, it will actually do it across all the tracks. Not sure if that's a good thing or bad thing, but it's there. You can turn noise on and off, and then you have a run and a stop, which is like a slow down tape speed, which I'll let you guys check out right now. So let me just play it. It's just on the stereo bus of the song, and I'll run through some of the different types. We'll crank it up. You guys can hear how it's working. And notice the thud too, the THD. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. So you see when we crank it up, you can see how the distortion is really hitting from that kick, because the kick is most prominent. So that's kind of the sound of it, just so you guys can hear it really quick. One cool thing, like I said, you can get a really cool chorus effect out of here. And what you do is you crank up this wobbly, crank it up to wobbly, and then blend it in. So check it out. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. And then I hit stop. So you heard, it gave you a really cool kind of chorusy phase effect. That's something you can use on vocals or as an effect on the master, just like that. And as you could probably hear, we could get a lot of different tones really quick with this thing. Love this thing on vocals. Actually, there is a preset I will show you guys by Joe. These ones here, the Vox Fatten or Vox Soft Satch. I'll use those quite a bit on vocals. Really cool on bass. If you need it, it can be good on drums. I don't use it on the master bus too much, but I'm not a big fan of tape on the master bus, so maybe if you are, you might like it. To me, it just kind of takes too much of the transient out. But a killer tape plugin and one of my go-tos when I need that sound. All right, number 2 on the list is Harmonics. To me, this is such a slept-on Harmonics processor. It can give you so many different tones and it works great on drums. It's a little too much for master, even on their master button, but drums, bass, music, vocals, everything. If you need like some sort of saturation, it just can work in so many different ways. So let's run through it and then I'll show you a couple examples. First off, you have these 5 different types. So you have solid, which is inspired by handmade quality solid state components from the 70s. Transfer F is like the transfer sound of American consoles. It's really good for like kick and bass, stuff like that. Master is designed specifically for master bus applications. It's made to kind of keep the transients intact, and it does work. I wouldn't personally, like I've tried using it on masters. To me, it just changes the color too much, but maybe if it was something you were mixing into, it would really work really good for that. Tube is, you know, based on like the 60s style tube, boutique tube circuits, really good for bass and guitar and stuff like that. And then you have modern, which is inspired by an English all-valve modern distortion box with triode settings. And I believe that would be the Culture Vulture. So could be wrong, but I'm assuming that's what that's after. And that sounds really good. You have drive, obviously, which is, you know, drives how much distortion you're using. Character is almost like a tilt EQ, although it supposedly works a bit different for each different type. But basically right is brighter and left is darker or more bassy, depending on how you hear it. And this is what I really like about this DTS dynamic. It uses a unique algorithm that analyzes part of the incoming audio material before distortion and reconstructs the dynamics of the original waveform. So it's really cool in the respect that it will give you the dynamics you had before distortion, but after the distortion, if that makes sense, because sometimes obviously the distortion is going to change your dynamics. So you can go different ways with this. You can have more control, so it's a little more compressed, or you can have it the opposite where more transients are let through and it's a bit more punchy. So this knob itself can give you tons of different sounds after you kind of get your distortion together. Finally, on the right side, you have wet dry, which is great, you know, for blending just a little bit of distortion in, and then a high cut and a low cut with a couple different filters, and you can switch those on both pre and post. So let's check it out. We'll just run through these really quick and you guys can hear it in action.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
So you guys can hear like how they break up differently. So my 2 favorites are usually modern and transfer X or transfer F. And then solid works well sometimes as well. But I really like modern and transfer.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby.
And where I use this the most is actually on drums. And so here I have it on transfer. Drive same, character the same. It's not really pushing too much. And I'm not even actually using the dynamics, but let's just hear what it is, how it sounds with it and without it. So kind of different tones. You hear a little more of the saturated kick on the transfer, where it's a little cleaner on the modern. But this thing's awesome on drums and one of my go-tos for just that. Okay, so while we're on it, let's open up the Chandler Zener-Bender. Now, what this is basically they came out with the EQ, the Chandler Curve Bender, and then the Zener-Bender as 2 separate plugins, and now they've combined it into one. So you can buy it all as one package. And basically, this works amazing on the master bus, EQing anything. The compressor sounds really good. I tend to use it a lot on my drum bus. I'll flip between this and the Shadow Hills. If you guys watch any of my other videos, you know I use the Shadow Hills a lot. This one sounds really great sometimes too, and actually been using it a bit more lately. So basically, it works just like a regular compressor. You have release, attack, you have a side chain, which I'll switch between 90 and 300. And then compressors, 2 types of compressors, a limiter, input output, and input gain, and then you have a 4-band EQ basically. And so this is my setting I use on drums quite a bit. And what I'll do is I'll just compress it a touch, and then I'll EQ to taste. Different EQ settings will work for different spots. So yeah, check it out with and without it. So you can see that I'm barely compressing, and that might even be a little bit too much because to me it's sounding a little too warm, but super killer for that. And what's great about it is having it all in one is, hey, if we got too much bass going, we can turn it down really quick here. And say we want it to punch through a little bit more, we can boost a little more 3K. And let's take a listen to that. So really quickly, you can change the tone of your drums just like that. So spectacular for this, spectacular for mix bus. Make sure to check it out. All right, number 4 is the Weiss Deesser. This thing is the GOAT of all deessers. I use it on vocals all the time, and then when I need to use it on a master, I can. When I have a master that is just too SE and I didn't mix it and I need to be able to fix that, it works wonders for that. The way I use it on vocals is the vocal 2-band control. And what it does is it gives you just that, 2 bands of control. And it has different bands you can pick from. You can turn it on and off, you can solo it, and then this is the threshold on how much it's going to de-ess. So this vocal is pretty simple and only has 1 S in it really, so we won't be able to hear it in too much of action, but I'll show you exactly how I use it.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
Actually did have more S's than I thought. So you can hear how it worked. And if you watch over here, you'll see each band working. So you'll notice sometimes one goes and sometimes the other goes. And that's what's great about it. It's not like a full band de-esser where you're de-essing everything. It's just the parts that need it when it needs it.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's...
So you can hear it with and without as well. So killer de-esser for vocals, I highly recommend it. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so last on the list is a reverb. It is the TSAR Reverb. I love this reverb for a couple reasons. It sounds really good. And number 2, it's just so easy to get different sounds out of it. And like I said, on the first plugin, when I was talking about tape, I always like plugins that we can get to the destination quickly. So you have pre-delay here, you have the time really quick, you can turn up and down, you have your density, and then you have tone, which like really it's too bright, bring it down, it's too dark, or back and forth. And then you have your high cut here. Then up here you have early reflections, and there's just 3 types. I like less things to choose from. It's a lot easier that way. Then over here is your diffusion, and last but not least, you have modulation. So if you want to move a little bit more, you can do that. You have slow, fast, and random. Simple. And then if you want more reverb or more early reflections, you can change it here. So really quick, like this is how it came up default.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
So cool, a nice little kind of room sound, but just in like 2 seconds, and I actually got this setting from Jason Joshua. This is like a kind of rap verb he uses. You can just crank those time down and crank the pre-delay down to 0.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
And it's just like a cool room verb. Or you can crank it way up and put a huge pre-delay.
You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. You won't go fooling me twice now, baby.
So we just got like 6 different reverb sounds in a matter of about 30 seconds from this one reverb. So if you are new to mixing or you're not new to mixing, this one's really great just to learn from and be able to get a sound you want really quick just by changing the time and the density and a little bit of the tone. You can come out with tons of different sounds. So killer sound of reverb, super intuitive, And that is last one. All right, guys, so those are my 5 favorite Softube plugins. I'd love to know which ones you are using in the comments below. Which ones are your favorites? If you need your songs mixed or mastered, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. You can also find my courses and presets there too. Talk to you soon.